Hello everyone, Kristina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SimonsStamp.com. Today I'm going to be using the stamp set that is included in the March 2024 card kit. The stamp set is called Mix and Match Butterflies, and in the card kit you do get the dies for one of the butterflies and the butterfly body, but there are additional dies available at the SimonsStamp.com shop. There are dies for every single image in the stamp set, and I'm not going to be using the dies today, but I just want to let you know that those are available. So I'm going to be making 3 different cards today. There's lots of stamping, lots of coloring, and lots of fussy cutting, but I'm just going to walk you through the creation of all 3 cards. So the thing that's really fun about this stamp set is when I designed it, I made it so that you could use different top wings and different bottom wings, and you could mix and match them, hence the name, to create a bunch of different butterflies. I think in total you can make 9 different butterflies, and I'm going to be making quite a few of them today. So I'm going to be coloring the butterflies with an alcohol marker. So I'm using Copics today. So I'm using an alcohol marker friendly ink. I'm using Simons Stamp Intense Black ink. And as I stamp each butterfly, I'm stamping it twice so that I have a really solid impression. So basically, I just stamped either the top or the bottom first, and then I came back in and lined up the other half of each butterfly and then stamped that. And as you can see, my stamps have already been used. I tried this card a couple of different times just to practice. And so my stamps had a little ink on them. So in order to make sure I didn't accidentally transfer ink where I didn't want it to be before I was ready, I used a placement guide or this grid sheet to just pick up the stamps and move them around on my project, and then close the door of my MISTI to transfer those stamps in the position where I want them. And this was a great way to get all of my stamping done for all of these butterflies. So I did all of the stamping at the same time, where I stamped all the wings, and then I went back through and stamped all of the bodies of the butterflies. And because I was making 3 cards all at the same time, I did a ton of butterflies. I just wanted to have options. I wanted to be able to kind of move them around and get different looks and things like that. I also stamped all of the little flowers and the heart that are in the stamp set as well. So I stamped this last butterfly here, and I made sure to ink them up a couple of times so that all of the lines matched. So after I had stamped all of the butterflies, I then used my heat tool just to heat set these a little bit. Now you could let the ink dry on its own, and it's perfectly fine. But since I did stamp these twice to make sure I had a really solid line, I thought it best to heat set these before coloring. I cut apart all the different images, and then I'm going to start working on each card individually. And I'm going to be doing some ink blending and Copic coloring, so I wanted to figure out all of my colors in advance. I'm using the color Cabbage from Simons Pawsitively Saturated ink line, and I'm also using the color Ballet from their Rainbow Splash ink line. And I wanted to see what that looked like as a full strength, putting that ink directly on the paper, and also when it was ink blended. So for my first card, I'm going to be using this circle die cut to create a mask to go behind my butterfly. So I just sized up a different circle die from Simons Stamp's Nested Circle die set. And then I have a sheet of masking paper, and this is masking paper from Simon. And I just put that over on the left side of the masking paper and then cut out my circle. And because I'm not going to be using the interior of the circle or the positive die cut, I decided to just label that as masking paper and then put it back into my storage pocket. So I'm using the outer area of my masking paper, and I'm putting that directly down onto my card front. This is an A2 card, so the card is cut to A2 size and the masking paper is also A2 sized. And just to make sure I didn't accidentally miss any of those edges when I was masking, I did use a bit of Post-it tape just to protect those edges. I'm now bringing in the color Cabbage, that color that I tested out before, and I ink blend it on until I have this nice circle. And when I remove that masking paper, you can see I have a crisp line all around that green circle. So I'm going to set this aside and let it completely dry while I figure out the colors for my Copic coloring. Now, as you can see, that green color and also the pink color that I put down earlier have faded back. They've dried completely and they look very, very solid. And I wanted it to do that before I picked out my Copic colors. So here are the 4 Copic colors that I'm going to be using for coloring my butterflies for all 3 cards. And I'm labeling the colors on my little kind of swatch sheet here, just in case you were wondering what colors I'm using for all of my coloring. Okay, so let's get into all of that coloring. I'm going to actually speed up the video footage so you can see the coloring. Now, I did make a little note in the bottom corner of this cardstock here. You'll notice it says margin, and that's just to remind myself that for this card, I'm going to be cutting out the butterfly with a white margin around it. And I wanted to remind myself of that so I didn't go past the edges of the butterfly and have to correct it later. So I used all 4 colors on my butterfly, just did solid coloring, kept it really, really simple. And then for that margin, I used a pencil to draw that around. This is just going to make it easier when it comes to cutting out this butterfly. So after I'd colored it and added that pencil line, I then fussy cut around those edges. And I'm really glad I did pencil in that line because it made it so easy to go around and make sure that I had an even white border around my butterfly. All right, so now I'm going to prep the greeting for this first card. I've got a little bit of black cardstock. I'm adding my anti-static powder tool kind of really liberally all across this black cardstock. I'm positioning the hello greeting from the stamp set and then stamping that in white pigment ink from MISTI stamp. I've found recently, probably in the last 6 months or so, that I get a better result with white heat embossing on top of a dark surface if I stamp my image or greeting in white pigment ink and then apply the white embossing powder. In this case, I'm using Alabaster from Brutus Monroe. When I do it this way, if there's any gaps in that embossing powder, the white ink will show below and it really cleans it up and gives it a nice clean look. And then I can take a microfiber cloth after it's been heat set and the powder's melted and just wipe off any of that powder. And using some firm pressure on my fingertips cleans that up. So here I have my band of black cardstock with the greeting. And I realized that my greeting was just a little too far to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut that black narrow strip so that that cut will be hidden behind the butterfly. And then I'm adhering the left side of that black strip on top of some foam adhesive. I'm going to adhere that to the left side of my card front. And then I'm going to put my butterfly right on top. And it's at this point that I realized I forgot to erase my pencil lines after I cut out my butterfly. So I first erased those pencil lines and then adhered this right on top of that black foam strip using just some tape runner adhesive. And then I brought in the other half of that strip and using a T-square ruler, I helped line that up so it looks like it's one continuous black band with that greeting. And that's going to finish up my first card. We're going to jump right into the second card. For this second one, I'm stamping directly onto what will be the card front. So I'm actually going to do some masking. So while I'm stamping it on my cardstock, I also stamped it on some masking paper. So after I stamp each image to create my butterfly, I'm going to swap out my nice white cardstock, and I'm going to bring in that masking paper so that I can stamp the mask as well. And this is just so I don't have to keep moving my stamps in and out of my MISTI. All right, so also with this masking paper, I'm going to stamp the body of the butterfly. You'll notice that all of the images are separate on the masking paper, but they are together on my finished card front. So I'm going to take that card front and I'm actually going to cut it down a little bit. I originally thought I wanted to make a 5x7 card, but then decided that no, I think I want to do an A2 card. So I just used some Waffle Flower A2 layers dies for that. And then using the grid mat on my, the grid on my glass mat, I used that to help guide myself as I added some Post-it tape to kind of intersect the middle of that butterfly so that I can mask off and ink blend the bottom half. So I've fussy cut out those elements of the butterfly, and then I'm placing that over top on my card front. Now this is going to protect those areas so that I can later color in the butterfly. I then took Ballet Rainbow Splash ink and I ink blended on. And originally I thought I would have more ink saturated at the top edge of this section on my card. Eventually I'll come back and just make it all one even color. Then removed my masks, and this reveals that white cardstock underneath, and it turned out beautifully. I removed my Post-it tape that I had protecting the top half of the card, and then I'm going to go right into all of that Copic coloring. I love how these pinks play off each other. They're very similar colors, and it works really, really well for all of this coloring. Because I was doing very simple colors and just solid, the coloring came together very quickly. I'm now going to create the greeting for this card, and it's a very similar process as what I did for the first card. I'm using some black cardstock. I applied that anti-static powder and then stamped my greeting in white pigment ink. And just as it happened with that first greeting, you can kind of see it up there in that top corner, this worked extremely well. I stamped my greeting in the white pigment ink, sprinkled on some of that alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, heat set it with my heat tool, and then I was able to take a microfiber cloth and just clean that off. I used my Tim Holtz mini trimmer to trim down that greeting as well. So there's a little bit more stamping on my card front. I have this little secondary greeting that says, may you feel loved and celebrated. So it's going to say happy birthday and then may you feel loved and celebrated. And I'm stamped that greeting in the same black ink that I used for the butterflies. So Simus Stamp Intense Black ink. At this point, this is when I realized that I wanted to have it just be solid pink on the bottom. So I did add more pink at the very bottom, and that ink hasn't dried yet, so it is quite intense. You'll see in the final photos that it's a very solid pink. So then I took my colored card design and I put some Tombow Extreme adhesive on the back and adhered that directly to a card front. I'm then going to add my very narrow greeting. And I realized at this point that I needed it to be even more cut narrow. So I temporarily adhered it to a bit of white cardstock, so it's kind of acting as a handle. And then I used a ruler and a craft knife to just cut that down a little bit more narrow. I also put some little V-shaped ribbon ends on each side of the greeting. And then I adhered that directly over the center of that butterfly, lining up with that pink and white line in the center of the card. And that's my second card. We're going to move right on to the third card for today. And I'm going to start by kind of creating a pale green card base for my card design. I wanted there to be a very pale green shade for the kind of background of my card, and I didn't have the right color of cardstock for this, so I just created my own by ink blending that Cabbage ink onto some white cardstock. And then I started coloring all of my butterflies, and here's where you can see the big variation in how different these butterflies look, but also how similar they are, because the top half and the bottom half have the same line weight. So you really can mix and match these butterflies so that you can get some different looks. So this top and bottom are actually meant to be together. You can see that they work really well. And then this next one, This one is also a set that is meant to be together, but now I'm going to split these in half and kind of mix and match. I've got that first butterfly with the bottom half of the third butterfly, and here's another one where they're mixed. I think it just looks really, really neat. I also colored all those little tiny elements that I stamped from the stamp set. Now this is when the most time-consuming part of this card came about. I decided to fussy cut all 5 butterflies and all of those little tiny images. And I knew I wouldn't be able to fussy cut around the antenna of the butterflies, so I'm actually planning to stamp the antenna later. So here are all of those little images cut out. And most of the time when you cut out an image right up next to the line, if you're not extremely careful and really good at fussy cutting, it can look a little bit messy. So in order to clean that up, I like to take a black brush tip marker and very carefully kind of paint the white edges of each of these shapes. And I even have a few mess ups. You'll see them on the final card where my brush tip marker kind of slipped. After I had all of my images prepped, I then adhered my green background to a 5x7 card base. And you can see that that ink blending has really evened out and smoothed out. I have a little fingerprint right there in pink ink, but that'll be covered up by a butterfly, so no problem. I then applied some foam adhesive on the back of each butterfly in sort of an X pattern, just, one strip of adhesive on each of the 4 wings. And then I took everything to my MISTI, and I'm going to be positioning each butterfly where I want it to be. I haven't glued it down or anything or adhered it. I'm just letting it sit there. I'm putting the body of the butterfly on top and then closing the door of my MISTI and picking up that butterfly. And when it comes to stamping the body of the butterfly, I'm going to mask off the bottom portion of that butterfly body and then peel up that Post-it tape and only stamp about the top third of the body image. And I'm doing it this way so that if I don't get my butterfly perfectly adhered in that area, it's not going to show. So then I removed the release paper on that foam tape and glued it down or adhered it down directly over those stamped antenna. And I did the same thing for each one of these butterflies. I first positioned the butterfly and then positioned the body, masked off the bottom of the body and stamped only the top third, and then adhered the butterfly right on top. And you'll notice I'm kind of moving from top to bottom on my card design. And that's so that I can get these positioned around an area that will leave an empty spot for the greeting. So after I had 3 butterflies adhered, then I stamped my greeting and then proceeded to continue putting on all of these butterflies. So there's quite a few gaps along the butterflies. I'm going to fill that in with some edges from the butterflies that I cut off. So I'm using a ruler and a craft knife just to cut off the areas that are kind of bleeding off the edge of my card. And I'm going to save each one of these little bits of butterflies so that I can use it on other areas. I didn't use all of these that I set aside, but I did use quite a few, especially those larger pieces. So this butterfly, little tip of that wing, I'll just have that right off the edge here on the left side. I thought that nestled in really nicely. And then I'm going to take this other large piece and put that over on the side, making sure that it kind of bleeds off that edge. I filled in some larger gaps with the small images that I cut out, and I made sure to adhere those down and press them very hard. And then I just cut off anything that was hanging off the edge. And this is going to finish the 3rd card. This was definitely the more time-consuming card, but I think it turned out so great. So all in all, for all 3 cards, it took me about 3 hours. And that includes all that fussy cutting and the masking and ink blending. Not too bad for 3 cards. I guess it averages out to about an hour a card, even though the first 2 cards came together much more quickly. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the stamp set that I used today is included in the March 2024 card kit from MISTI Stamp. Everything I've used today, including that card kit, is linked down below in the video description, as well as a link if you want to subscribe to receive this card kit and future card kits. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in another video very soon.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.